Hello, everyone, and welcome to Replay Works, and welcome back to another replay review. Today, we're going to be talking about the Egman events triple winner box that happened on the release weekend for the Gundam Card Game. So, this big event had 64 players. Eggman covered a lot about it. He had a video already on the top decks that played, along with the deck list from 1 through 8th, or 8th and 8th part 2, because two people had the same tiebreaker, and 11 and 12. So, that's 11 decks worth of information that for me to use, which is perfect. I can use it and go ahead and run the analysis on it. So let's jump right in. Let's take a look at the overall placements. We got the top 4. It is very reminiscent of the first replay review, where you have green-white on top and then blue-white, blue-white, blue-white. Kind of makes sense, you know, blue-white just from... as you can see from the placements, this is a very common deck that everyone's playing. It's a very solid deck. It's a very, I'd say, safe deck right now in the meta. They have a lot of draw cards, a lot of consistency towards the late game. You have blockers that have very good stat lines, and you have, in this case, the Unicorn blockers. They have a final push with the Unicorn Gundam Destroy mode. On the other hand, you have a Wing Zero, and the Wing Zero event, in this case, has a little bit of difference from before. And I definitely want to talk about that as we look through the deck lists. So, from here, here's our overall color combinations. We have 5 blue-white decks in the 6 decks that, the 11 decks that we had. We have 3 green-white, 2 blue-red, and 1 blue-green. As a blue-green player myself, I am so excited to talk about that one later on. But let's cover the overall winner. After this, we have to just talk about the quick colors breakdown, just because of how how many white and blue shows up, but 8 out of the 11 decks play blue and 8 out of the 11 decks play white. So I'm gonna go on a limb very early and say that yes, blue and white are probably the strongest colors in terms of representation. Red is of course the weakest one, as we know. Red has Zaft cards, which are not that good right now, and we have the Cyber New types, which is what the decks that we're going to see are focused. So red has a good synergy with blue, and nothing, but no other colors kind of synergize well with red. Maybe you could make a case for red, green, Xeon, but yeah, that one's a little bit still iffy on that one. All right, so we got the unit stat lines per level. In this case, it's the overall decks from all 11 decks from all the colors, and we're going to see some interesting things again for level 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5, we see that the curve kind of like curves out between 4 in terms of HP and AP, and the average cost is 3.7. So it's mostly on turn 5 they're gonna be playing a card that, if they're not playing a 3 cost card, they can only play 1 card because it's gonna be 4 out of your 5 resources. So most likely it's gonna end up being a link turn for that. 6 in this case is a little bit similar. The average is 4, so we're going to be seeing stuff like the Wing Gundam from the Star deck be that prime example of someone who shows up on turn 6. You can link him right there. You probably have 1 left over, and even if you don't, you're going to be able to essentially link him with Hiryui this turn or next turn, or if you don't want to do that, you can play him, and you can play a 2-drop as well. So, going down, I like looking at the 2, 3, 4 because that's your early game, and a lot of the game right now is, I would say, very mid-game heavy, just from like the decks that are topping these events in terms of the breakdown. But I think that when you're looking at the level 2s, you see that like it's 1.5, so it's mostly going to end up being the 3/2 blocker that costs 2 for white. Costs 2 ready, so it's your entire turn. And then for your level 3s, you're going to end up seeing the Gundam Lifrit a lot. That's a 2/4 blocker that costs 2 on turn 3, right? So we don't really see a lot of stuff that's slower to the curve. Maybe if, for example, in the green representation, we could see Zaku 2s count as like the 1-drop cost. But for the most part, there is going to be a specific set of cards that I can name off the top of my head in those 2 categories that we're going to see a lot in this current meta. Just talk about one. One is the DOP. I'm pretty sure it's the DOP. It's just a 1/1 that, when it comes to play, you check top. It's a fun card to play for rush decks. It's a good turn 1 play, and you get to like eventually like put stuff that you don't need on the bottom of your deck, like I don't know, extra pilots if you need it, or a really high cost. Level 4 in this case, this one's interesting to me. The average for this one is 2.5 for the cost. So in most decks, you're able to actually multiplay on turn 4, or when you're at level 4 rather, which means that you can kind of build a little bit of tempo from there, especially if you're playing, I don't know, like for example, for me, I can play 2 Galgooks on that same turn, right? Those are 4/3 attackers. It kind of helps that curve out where you know that turn 4, you get to push a little bit the next turn, as long as you play 2 drops. And also knowing that in this still early part of the game, the average HP and AP is still 3.4, so you're looking at like anything that has 4 HP is relatively safe in that area. The question is like what few cards have that 4 HP, right? Because Malifrit's the big example. I don't know, the 3/4 vanillas are also good examples for that. So keep those in mind as you play throughout the game, where if you want to play a little bit stronger early game, turn 4 is probably the turn that you can start to set up a little bit of a rush next turn. So from here, let's go ahead and talk about the green-white decks that we see. So this is the average of the 3 decks. In terms of the cards per deck, we're going to see a solid 27 units, a little bit more than half. We have between 9 and 10 pilots. Most of them are leaning towards 9, but the winning deck, I believe, had 10. 9 command cards, which is going to be mostly your ramp cards and your draw cards. And your bases from here is 4.6, so it's going to be anywhere between 4 and 5. Now, those are, like, I think, good showings of average, like, which averages you want to play in your deck. I think, at this point in the game, the cards that go in your deck and the ratios of cards really depends on what your deck is focused around. In this case, this deck is a lot about consistency and ramping, so that's why you have such a higher command count compared to other decks, and it works out in its favor since you do want to see those cards more often than not. Now, a new metric I added for the average cards per level is to show the breakdown of what type of card per level. So it allows us to look at it and say, okay, well, for example, the level 2 cards, we got 4 bases, 3.3 commands, 4.3-ish units, right? So it allows us to say that, okay, well, not every card of these, let's say 12 cards, is going to be all units. We'll actually get to see that, what to expect on certain turns. More specifically, let's look at the level 4s, right? Level 4, Hiruyui, Duo Maxwell, and I believe Kira is playing the decks. Those are all level 4 pilots. So looking at this, saying, hey, level 4, it's looking that there's only few units in the decks that are played that are going to be coming on level 4. So you can assume that on level 4, what's going to happen is they're going to either play a consistency card, they're going to try to play a ramp card. You kind of get a sense of what their game plan is going to be, right? That depends on if they're playing, I don't know, like more level 3s that cost 2, they can multiplay those as well, right? Drop down a Lifrit, drop down 2 Lifrits if they want to. But from here, after that, the 6s, 7s, 8s, those are pretty standard in my opinion. 7, I think it's like what, Freedom. 6s is going to be the starter deck Wing Gundam, along with Death Scythe for the LR Death Scythe. And then 8 is the only 8 in the game right now is LR Wing Gundam. But level 5 is also interesting, where I believe we're going to see some seed representation from there, a little bit of the blockers, just to give you a little bit of sneak peek, where we do have some tech in that level 5 slot, right? It's not just all the commands. Actually, let's talk about the commands later from there when we can see the deck list, right? So, to round it out, here's the average cost for the deck and the AP and the HP for each level. Now, some of these are very easy to pinpoint. For example, level 2, it's a 3/2 blocker. Level 3, we see the average of 2 attack and 3 HP, right? So this is basically your Lifrit adding up those numbers, along with something else that's higher cost in that sense, like a 3/3, for example. Or rather, a 3 cost on level 3. And then from here, again, from anything past like 7, 8, because of the limited card pool right now, we kind of can assume that depending on, like, when it's green, we know that it's going to end up being specific stuff, or green-white rather. Well, we can see it's Freedom, and it's Hiroyui's Wing Gundam. But level 6s, also it's a little bit similar, where we know that it's going to be Death Scythe and Wing Gundam. But level 5 is also interesting. 444 across the board, right? So that to me is a telltale sign of the Ale Strike Gundam from the set, or the Perfect Strike Gundam in the booster pack. Right? So let's look at the top deck list, right? And like I mentioned, we have the Ale Strike Gundam right there. That is our level 5. There are no level 4s in this deck specifically. There was other lists that had the Death Scythe with Repair as a level 4 target, and an extra target for Duo to link with. But, you know, we can see that this deck, the ramp in this case, comes in the form of Wing Gundam Bird Mode, which is the ideal level 3 target. I personally haven't played the deck, but I can assume that you don't want to spend your EX resource to play this card just to get back your EX resource. You want to make sure that if you're going first, you play this. Next turn, you actually skip your 4 and go to 5, which allows you to play the Ale Strike a turn early. If you're going second, I can imagine that lets you go from level 4 to level 6, right? Which is really good because then you can play your big guys like Death Scythe and Wing from there. So you don't really need to focus on level 4, level 5, depending on if you go first or second. And either way, if you're going first or second, I don't think you really care. As long as you see Bird Mode in your hand, you're good to go and skip that level and go straight into your big guys. Now, like I said, like the lower side is going to be the blockers, which helps prevent the chip damage early in the game. It's a deterrent, essentially. Now, what's interesting about this deck is that, the base it's playing is 06. I think I talked about last time. I like that still. It's really hard to get rid of that cleanly. But in terms of the commands, they're also playing 2 First Contact, which is the ramp, which is essentially you're playing 6 cards in your main deck that when you're at level 3 can help you skip the next level, right? And I think being able to do that on that curve is going to be huge, especially when you need to go in Death Scythe and then link again with Duo, so you go from 6 to 8 the next turn, which means that everything's online. You can double play a lot of stuff. You can go ahead and start indiscriminately putting down cards as well. Now, the last command that stood out to me is the Path to Victory or Defeat, which is essentially you take top 4 and add I'm just going to call it a Wing Boy or unit to your hand. So this allows you to search out for Duo, Hero, or Death Scythe, or Wing Gundam, depending on which one that you're missing the link for on that turn that you're going to try to play it. So this allows you to like set up for, let's say, for when you're level 6, right? If for some reason you end up not in the Bird Mode on curve, you can still play on that turn. Essentially, or hypothetically, even if you go first, you play Bird Mode on 3, go to 5 next turn, you play Path to Victory or Defeat, so you set up for your next turn, because you're not really playing anything on that's really relevant for that turn anyway. So I think from that, like that consistency engine is very underrated right now because we don't have those type of cards, and I think that's really what the strength of the deck is. Like, almost guaranteeing that you're going to see these cards, so when you need it, you can start pushing. And that's probably why I took first from here, because if you're able to skip those levels against the blue-white deck, they're locked down to a specific pattern in terms of what levels they're playing cards. So by allowing this deck to skip the levels, go straight into that, and start putting down heavy beaters after that, and potentially link them the same turn, it almost becomes like as soon as you have 10, you're going to be able to put down Wing Gundam with 2 heroes, or like Wing Gundam Death Scythe, and start linking swing at their field from there. So it really, I think Path to Victory Defeat, I think in this type of deck, I really do believe it should be 4 of, and I like that it's the one that won. So now we look at a deck from the other placements, right? Now this one it's very similar, right? Except for this one's playing 2 Freedoms as your level 7 curve, and the Death Scythe that I mentioned before, it's a 1 of on the level 4 curve. Now this gives Duo 5 targets to link with. I think it's nice. I don't like the Repair 1 on Death Scythe. I don't know why it has that, to be honest. Seems a little bit weird to me. But this deck is also just playing 2 Path to Victory Defeat, so it's a little bit... It's not fully committing to the consistency engine. It's playing extra stuff like the Freedom Gundam right here, as a big blocker and a link target for Kira. I think that's... I don't think the deck needs it, to be honest. Like, I think, like, the first place deck had a main mission, which is just to go ramp, go to 6 as fast as possible, then from there, try to go to 8 or 9 the next turnover, and then start pushing for game with huge guys, right? Huge 6-4 guys. So, yeah, so this is like one of the other ones that ranked. I think there's clear differences on between the two lists on which one, like, why the first one was able to have a better time against the other matchups. So that's it for green white. Let's take a look at white blue, right? The favorite child of the decks. From here we see 27 units. I think that's going to be our pretty consistent numbers, especially when you're playing a lot of pilots like this one. You're playing 11, almost 12 pilots sometimes. The commands are between 6 and 7, so mostly 7, and then 5 bases, right? So Archangel plus white base, I think, is going to be the most common ones. And as we can see from our distribution in terms of the level per cards, right? A lot of level 4 pilots and a couple level 5 pilots, right? This kind of helps the deck, like, it hits that target where it's on turn 5. You can't expect you're gonna expect a link. You can expect Kira to do something. Amuro can also be a huge push from there, because once you set up your field of blockers, if your opponent doesn't want to do anything and they might have something that could be a threat, then Amuro comes in and helps remove that threat, essentially, right? But you know, the thing I like to pay attention to again is the early game, right? And from our distribution for the level 2s and level 3s, we can see that it's like, it's commands and bases. For the most part, but then we have a little bit more level 3 units, which I think is good now. I think before, I think we've seen decks that had a lot of some level 4s in there. I think they're probably vanillas or extra blockers, but leaning it a little bit closer to level 3 means that this deck can put down a good, solid early game, wait out the extra turn on turn 4, maybe multiplay a little, and then on turn 5, you probably have a good sized board that has good HP numbers from there. Alright, so let's take a look at the AP and HP, right? So this is interesting to me, right? The level 3s and level 4s, we're looking a little bit on the low end, right? 2.8 on level 3s, which is Lifford bringing that down. And then level 4 is 3.1, right? So we're not really seeing like turn 4 costs for 4 AP and 4 HP on level 4. We're seeing them a little bit lower, which is good to play around with, because if you see like they have like 3 4s, well, realistically with Kira it's gonna be like a 5 if my maths is right. So it's like at level 4 is when you start to see like a little bit of linking happening, but again, most decks are trying to like stay away from the level 4s in this deck, right? More of them are leaning towards 3s and 5s, right? And of course, as we go towards 5, it caps out around like 4 4s, which is where the Ale Strike and the Perfect Strike come into play. And then 7 is Unicorn and Freedom from there. So we get to kind of see like which thresholds you should be hitting. Level 5, I don't believe most people would try to link that early with Kira, so you can expect to see a 4-4 come down on that turn, right? Whether it be Ale Strike or Perfect Strike. But you know, the interesting to note is that there's no level 6 units in the deck, which means that on their turn 6, when they're at level 6, it's going to be a little bit of an awkward time for them to play stuff, because they're probably going to have to multiplay. They're going to have to, I don't know, draw 2, I guess, and play a 4-drop or the 3-drop, I guess. So like that turn, that level 6 is going to be a little bit awkward, but let's take a look at the deck list, right? So the only level 4 in this deck is the Gundam from the Star deck, pairs with Armor Array. We have the Regiselle as your vanilla of choice, so it's part of the level 3 2-cost cards, right? And the average works out pretty well. It's a good attacker as opposed to Lifford's good defending. It's a 4-3, so again, if you can multiplay that, it's gonna push for big numbers. Now, the interesting part here is that we actually do see a Gundam Unicorn mode played in the level 5 slot, as opposed to 4 Perfect Strikes, to link with Benager, and to get eaten by the Unicorn Destroy mode, so it can be played earlier on that same turn, or the next turn potentially if you want to link with Benanger. I think one Benanger gives 2+2+2, which I think is incredibly strong as a pilot. So you're going to be a 6/5 on turn 5. I think that's probably the strongest play. You do get him back if the unicorn mode is destroyed. So you do get to set up your destroy mode, getting to come in, be linked, get to swing, and start pushing aggro from there. So I think, you know, the unicorn mode, I would, hopefully because it's 1, I'm just going to assume that this is probably one of those things where you see it in your hand, you have to keep. Because it does open the pathway to getting easy access to destroy mode, and also take advantage of Benanger giving insane stats for that time in the game. And then another notable thing I want to call out is that Freedom Gundam actually is going down in usage. It's actually at 2 now. I believe earlier lists we saw like 4, we saw it maxed out, but I think it's starting to wane down, and I think that's correct because you have enough blockers. Like every other white card is a blocker. Actually, every white card is a blocker. You don't need more of this. And having more destroy modes allows you to push that aggro and beat over your other blockers your opponent might have. Because when it's a 5/6 swinging and can rest something, it's gonna it requires a lot of commitment to trade into. So I think we see more destroy modes. Even if it's just a hard cast on turn 7, it's still strong. It's going to be huge, especially when you have 4 Benangers floating in the deck. And then from here, the other interesting thing to me is that because we're running less blockers, we are also running less Archangels. We're down to 3 instead of the 4 that I've seen before, and along with 2 white bases, because I believe when you have the dead turns, like level 6, creating a token is perfectly fine. Like, you just have a way just to spend those resources just to get some more advantage, right? In addition to the draw 2s that you see in the command slots. So I like seeing the white base go up. I'm going to be very curious to see if we start to see less usage on certain blockers as this meta progresses. Personally, I think Perfect Strike is probably going to get kicked down again from it used to be at 3. Used to be at 4, now it's at 3. So I think that has the most chance to get kicked down to a lower level of cards, or potentially cut from the lineup, hypothetically. But another list, right? This list I was talking about, this is one maxes out on the Perfect Strike, Ale Strike, and Freedom, and Archangel. This is, I believe, quite an early list. It has 1 Unicorn Destroy mode, and 2 Gundams. The thing that's interesting is that it's playing the Angsha, which deals 1 damage to an enemy unit that's rested. It's a 2. That one I feel, to me it feels a little bit out of place. I think that one, I'm sure there must be a very specific reason that it's in the deck, but the fact that it's level 4 to deal 1 damage is a little bit wonky, because hypothetically if someone's playing like 3/1 aggro rushers or something, you could just use like a gun tank or something. But that one I would, if someone can help me explain like what Angsha could be used, especially at 2 of, you know, just let me know. I could imagine it helps ping so you can bounce with Ale Strike when you pair, or at level 5 you can ping a 2 cost level 2 HP unit down to 1, so you can bounce with Perfect Strike. But I don't know. That one I'm just a little bit confused on, just because it doesn't seem like you're getting a good advantage from there. Because I'd rather just destroy a unit than bounce it to my opponent's hand. Especially when it's like if it's a 3/2, it's probably gonna cost like 2 resources anyway, and most decks at that point should be able to multiply from there. But that's enough nitpicking about that one. Let's move on to the blue-red deck. Alright, so this is going to be your Cyber New type ping decks, and this deck definitely wants to play a lot of units, right? The whole premise is to put down units as fast as possible, putting damage on the board. You're going to hit go from turn 2, level 2 rather. But yeah, the end result is that you're going to see, for example, in the average cards, right? We're going to see that the majority of the level curve is in the level 4s. Between the pilots like you play, like Marita Amuro, and between the level 4, like for example the Vanilla Kashtira, those are all there along with the draw 2 card as well. Right, so the deck from here, like it just needs to stabilize a little bit early game, put a little bit of damage, and then once level 4 hits, then you start multi-playing from there. And just to point out, it's pretty even spread, like 4 commands, 4 bases, and almost like 7 or 8 pilots depending on the deck ratio. So I think that's also a pretty clean list. That this, I would say, is a good example of decks that want to have a lot of units but still need that little bit of bases and commands in the deck to kind of just act as a way to get more consistency in your deck. Alright, so here's your average cost. It's pretty funny because like level 2s, for example, they all cost 1. They're all either 2/2 vanillas with the gun tank. And I think that's great because, I mean, these cards at any point, they can start filling in the gaps if you have extra resources to play and you don't need it. They can come in throughout the game, it's just going to be another headache for your opponent to deal with towards the middle part of the game when you start to see like the curve, for example, on level 4, the average cost per unit is 2.5. So you're going to end up with either 1 or 2 extra resources. If you end up with 2, that's good. You can play 2 vanillas or something. But if you end up with 1, then this is where these vanillas come into play. These 2/2 vanillas, where they just are meant to fill in those gaps so you can keep putting guys in the field. Yeah, and then the 5 and 6s, we're just gonna see force. Well, this one is a little bit wonky. Let's just look at the list. Because of the interesting part is that they're all actually 5/4s. I think my chart just kind of cut them off a little bit. So this was actually the top rank blue-red deck, right? And there's a couple of callouts here that I was very keen on talking about, right? So we have Gun Tank, GM, Vanillas, whatever, Riziel, Angsha, we have Delta Plus. Delta Plus here is a link for an Earth Federation, so Amuro, or the thoroughly damaged Hayato that's also down there in the bottom. So those are all Earth Federations. He gets an extra attack point, right? So if you link him with Amuro, he becomes a 6/5 on turn 4, which is a whole turn earlier from the green-white and the blue-white decks that we saw. Like, you get to have such a big body here. He has repair 1. So that's a pretty strong turn 4, I'd say, where he comes down and you get to just have this big body on the field. The Hayato, I guess, turns into a 4/5, which is cool. I think it's just there because he plays Delta Plus. I think it's pretty cool that you can just do that instead of using it for its command ability to deal an extra damage. But I think it's also noteworthy, right? You deal extra damage. It can matter sometimes. It can be the extra thing that kills something that has 3 HP because you might only be able to do 2 damage on the board, right? Now, the Gundam of choice is the LR Gundam, and it gives all the white base units repair 1, but that's really only the gun tank and itself. But more importantly, its one paired ability is you get to draw a card if you have 2 or more other units, which in this deck you should be fielding guys as soon as the game starts, so you probably will get that draw, which is great, because then you get to turn him into like a mini Benager, right? 3/3 for the stats for this is pretty low, I guess, because the 3/4 from the star deck is what I'm used to seeing, which I think trades better, and also, like, if you look at all the pilots, they only give 1 HP, right? So he's looking for aggro numbers. This is a card that's looking to trade up, not act as a defensive wall. You're not looking to make him into a 4/6. You're making him into a 5/4. You want him to push, which is fine. I think that's pretty good from that. Then you also have the Vanilla Kashtira, along with. Now, this is interesting. We have Unicorn, Banshee, Unicorn mode, 2 of, and then 3 Kashtira, level 5, and then 3 of the Banshee Destroy mode. Now, these all, to me, are new ratios, right? I think Banshee Destroy mode, we only saw like 1 or 2 last time we looked at these type of lists. So the fact that this is like here and at this much is pretty crazy, because it shows how much that extra attack is going to be worth, how much that first strike is going to be worth, especially when you're only playing 3 Maritas now. We went on down that. So there's a lot of like different changes here that make the deck, I think, push numbers better. It's leaning more towards aggro as opposed to when it was like felt like a control deck. Now, the Banshee here, the Unicorn mode rather for Banshee, it has a when pair ability, so it does work with any of the pilots. The link is only with Marita, but when you pair it, you choose an enemy unit with 3 less HP and you rest it. So that is fairly strong, since you can essentially, if you pair them with armor array, you're resting 2 units, so your opponent's going to lose their board most likely from this interaction. But I think it's a very strong like counter tempo play, and then from there you have a 6/4 for your opponent to deal with, and they probably have to link to get rid of it if they do, and if not, you just keep swinging with him, or you trade up, because again, he's 6 attack. Just like Delta Plus, having 6 attack this early in the game is just amazing, because your opponent cannot put something in the field and expect it to live through that. Now, the Kashtira being at 3, along with Marita at 3, I think this makes sense as well, since you're trying to hold this, because it's a when paired ability, so it's only going to trigger once. I think that makes sense that you're just going to hold it until you can either link with Marita so you can get to kill something, but it's definitely not something that you would just like slam down and expect to like have going forward. I think you'd rather spend your turn 5 either multi-playing, like you play the Gundam and Kashtira, you can play Delta Plus and link it, you can, I don't know, use Pot of Greed and play literally any other combination of units from there, which is, again, big tempo. And the last big thing that we see is there's no white base anymore, is Vasilius is the base of choice, where it gives +1 AP to a friendly unit you have, so your 2/2 vanillas become 3/2, your Rezel becomes 5/3, even Gun Tank becomes 2/2, right? So these guys all get to trade up, and we know that the curve starts around 3-4 HP, so even Angsha gets to push up. But especially for this, like the 2/2 vanillas in combination with the Gun Tank and a Vasilius can trade into a 4 HP guy, which is very strong, right? And like you think about what that 4/4 means, Gale Strike, to your opponent, and you look at your gym, and you're saying, well, yeah, I mean, of course I'm going to sacrifice my gym to get rid of this thing. I don't care about the gym. They care about their blocker. Again, the fact that you're able to like use Armor Array to rest it and force this trade is great. I think this is starting to take shape in this deck. I like how it's turning out. Alright, so last but not least, Green Blue. Here we go. I love Green Blue. I've been staring at it for all weekend and got to do some stuff with it. No commands in this one. It's just pilots and bases, baby. Yeah, not even your draw 2. You just go straight 8 pilots, 4 bases, and everything else is a unit, right? And as you can see from the curve, we have 16 level 2s, 10 level 3s. You see, like, this deck was meant to, like, if you thought the blue-red deck was meant to go fast on turn 2, this one is like meant to just keep playing cards every single turn. So for the deck list and get excited, the average cost right here, it's a bit disingenuous, right? Level 2s, we have 1.5. That's pretty weak, right? We're playing Zaku 2s here, so those numbers are a little bit inflated on your attack phase. But the fun part for me is that your 3s and 4s, right? 3s curve out around 3 AP, 4s curve out around 3.5, so some of them are mostly going to be 4 AP, right? I think that's going to be funny, because I'm pretty sure it's just going to be the Shard Gelgoog. But in this case, it's not, right? There's no Shard Gelgoog here. You know, if I heard this without looking at the deck list, I would have been like, oh yeah, of course they're going to be playing it. No. They are playing in their level 4 slots the Angsha and Gelgoog. Regular Gelgoog, not Chars, which still links with Char, funny enough. So I think the Gelgoog here is amazing. I love the 4/3 stat line. I love the fact that it's 2 costs and has a generic, air quotes, generic link. I also like the fact that the heavy costs here on level 6 is Wing Gundam with 4 heroes to back him up. I think that's pretty, like a really strong top end, where you're just able to breach, you're able to kill off units as much as you need. It becomes huge. It becomes a 7/7. That's gonna essentially blast through every single linked unit like in the game right now. The only way to get rid of it is to like to survive that is to link, I don't know, Freedom with Benanja, or someone has 2 HP, which is not that common. So Wing Gundam Hiryu right there, top end. You're meant, like, this deck holds pilots until you're ready to use that to go off. But you know, even if you have extra heroes in your hand, it's still a really good 2/1 add, which is kind of like how Char operates. Char operates as when you attack, you get +1 AP, so it's fundamentally a 2/1 on your turn. So when we see cards like the Rick Dom, that becomes a 5/4 Breacher. 5 is pretty relevant. Even if you pair him with a Zaku 2, well, the vanilla Zaku 2, it comes, 4, and we know that 4 is relevant. And you know that this deck only needs to keep the 1 for when he's able to do the Link Breach turn. I'm pretty sure it's gonna be some kind of like decision making within the game when you see multiple heroes but only like a few Wing Gundams. Well, you're gonna want to hold back the Wing Gundam and then play the heroes pretty just to help clear board, or it's vice versa. You're gonna want to conserve the hero if you only have like 1 in your hand and like 2 Wing Gundams, whatever. But yeah, he's also there as extra pilot to help trigger the Sharazaku 2 rare, so that's a when paired ability. Yeah, and then I think from here, like again, it's a bunch of guys that just say go on turn 1. Dop is there as a 2-of actually. I think that's fair. I think it's fair. I like Dop, especially to help fix your hand a little bit, especially early game. But even like mid game is pretty good. Like if you know that you need units, you play Dop like in turn 4, turn 5. You look at it and you're like, oh, it's another white base. So I put it at the bottom because you gotta dig for those units that you need to end the game with. White base here is good as a mana sink. You just get to summon tokens. If you time it right, you can get the 2/2 token pretty easily with this deck. I can't imagine things are living past like a certain turn. I think things are just meant to like go straight for face. And then you have Guntang and Angsha just to deal damage, ping stuff to get rid of it on the board. Right, soften them up, or just outright kill off. Like when you play them back to back, you just get rid of like guys that cost 2 or whatever. Or in this case, you can trade up to get rid of guys that have 4 HP. So I think those are great additions in this deck. I think like the fact that again you have so many good early game vanillas. I think it's just meant to like just completely go face. Alright, so with that being said, that is all the decks that were available for the deck list for the triple winner box for Egman events. I like to ramble a lot about this. I like these data points where I get to see what the meta is shaping out to be and see the changes week over week, so I hope you enjoyed that as well. I'm going to be using this in my fundamentals for deck building when I look at what deck I want to build, and I gotta know what threats there are in the meta. So, yeah, stay tuned. We're gonna have a little bit more on the channel for what decks replay. We're gonna be trying to cover big events as they happen, just to keep up with the meta, just to keep everyone informed. But yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for watching. If you haven't already, please like and comment and subscribe to the video. It really does show me that you're engaged, especially when it's a almost 40-minute long video. I think it really helps me to know that you're engaged here, you're keeping together. And if you have any suggestions for improvements, feel free. Like, we're still trying to work through what's good, and anything that's relevant to you is relevant to me. So I want to make sure that that's clearly communicated. So that being said, thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you in the next one.